Hello! For my second game framework, I choose to use the Unreal 4 engine. Let's start by looking at the results. So I'm going to emulate this play, use mobile preview. See that first, and then we'll adjust resolution. My game is called Fallen. It is a very simple proof of concept. The sort of basic idea I was thinking, though, was you do sort of a rail shooter or rail-like game, but falling through a tunnel or something, maybe power-ups along the way, and some sort of goal. For a larger game, this is just a very simple proof of concept. So here's the main menu. You have basically play or exit, play being fall. And here's the main game. So you can see we're on a platform. All that red area below us, let's jump in there. Well, guess what? Red is bad. So when I land on the red, I lose the game. And we can see I have two options again, returning to the main menu or exiting. Let's go to the main menu and then try the game again. If I jump off the side, and before I do though, we can actually see there's a little green spot. That's actually a hole. Let's try to land in there. So we kind of move a little bit while we're falling. And yay, we won by landing in the green area. And now exit. So let's look at some settings here. The resolution was 1920 by 1080. Let's try a common tablet resolution. Anything landscape should work. There's a smaller one. Alright, and play again. And everything should look identical. The game is locked to landscape mode. And fall, and here we go. And everything still works. So exit. This is actually the main menu level. It's all black. It's kind of their interface for UI is a little interesting. I'm actually using their visual scripting blueprint system. So this main menu level has its own blueprint. Let's go look at that. Open level blueprint. And this is some blueprint code I created to display the UI that we were seeing on the main menu. So when this level is loaded, we get this event begin play, and from there I call create, and I'm creating my main menu widget blueprint. This is another object I created in Unreal. I'll show you that in a moment. Once that's created, I add it to viewport. This allows it to be rendered, and I'm disabling showing the mouse cursor. So I'm using the set function to set that value. And it's just checkbox since that value is a bool. That value is a member of our player controller. So I have to get the player controller, and I'm setting the mouse cursor value on the player controller after I sort of spawn the UI widget. If I minimize this and go to GUI, and I've got three of these GUIs, the main menu, the win menu, and the lose menu. They are all very, very similar. Let's look at the main menu. I'm actually designer first. So here's where you design that look. So you can drag all sorts of buttons and things and objects to locate this. So this is a box that's basically sort of hierarchy. There's a vertical box, everything under it in that hierarchy will be displayed vertically. There's horizontal box, canvas panel, all these sort of general UI things and images. But so that's for all the things we saw on the menu. What they actually do, again, is using a blueprint graph, fairly simple one. We get on-clicked events for the buttons. These can be added from variables. So exit button, on-clicked, and I can just click that to add it. I could have on-pressed and on-released as well events for any of these buttons, but just on-clicked is all I need. So on-clicked for the play button, calls open level, and it opens our game map, which is our main game level. After that, I have to actually remove the UI widget so that we don't see the main menu while we're in the game map. So that's what this is doing, just removing that widget so we don't see it anymore. If the exit button is clicked, we get this event, and it just spawns a console command. So execute console command, and this is just a string-based command. You tell it whatever command you want it to execute. In this case, it's just quit, which will exit the game. That's generally how all three of these menus work. They all have just two buttons, either to play the main level, in the case of the main menu, or both the win and lose. They're on clicked will go to the main menu, whereas they're on exit does the same thing all the time. Go to maps, and then the game map. This is where the most interesting things of the game happen. Yes, that's fine. Save those things. Here we can see our game world. I'll actually start down at the bottom, way down here. This platform, the win floor, it's just a static mesh. You can see some of these static mesh type objects you can create by default. So this one was just a cube that I stretched out to an appropriate size. More interestingly, though, you might notice this green box around it. It's hard to click on that. That's actually our trigger box win. See, it's got selected. So that's a trigger box. It will spawn an event when things collide with it that I can react to in Blueprint. I'll show that in a moment. The red floor is actually a static mesh, not a one of these pre-built things. I built this in Maya, yay programmer art, and then imported that mesh. It did take a few extra steps in this case, as while this is a fairly simple mesh, it is concave, and the collision for it didn't work by default, so I actually had to go to that. Floor with hole. This is their sort of physics collision editor for meshes. Well, it's their mesh editor, and one of the things you can control is the collision. So by default, a concave shape like this wouldn't get concave collision. So when I first imported this, this hole that's in the middle, you would actually just stand right on there as though it was a solid surface. And I had to change some settings to make it always use a more complex collision routine to allow the player to fall through that hole. So back to our level. In addition to the trigger box win, there are 4 trigger boxes for lose. There's no weird concave trigger box shape, so I just dragged a few of these around to cover all of the sort of lose area. And if I move way back, these volumes are for the light, so this is just an importance volume. This is where we want to spend the most time. We want the lighting to look the best. Since there's not much else going on in the level while you're falling, you can't really see a whole lot of things. It didn't really make sense to make that any bigger. But up at the original platform, if we get closer, you can see our player character. This is just a default player character model, and with animations, it's available from Unreal. It's probably the most costly asset in this thing. But see, that's where the player will start. If I had networking support, this would be where a network player would start for multiplayer or things like that. And you can see the camera hovering above it. This isn't really a separate object from the player. The player has the camera. If we actually go to blueprints, you have the third-person character. I started with that default demo from Unreal and adjusted it to my needs for this case. But again, it has an event graph with blueprint stuff, not really anything interesting going on there. It's just for setting the input mode. More specifically, I wanted to mention this camera stuff. This is a very cool system. Your character doesn't have to have a camera, of course. If you could use this for an enemy and things of that nature, but for our character, we want a third-person camera. We can attach the camera right here and move it around, and this will just keep a relative position to the player And of course, there's different camera styles available. This one's going to follow the camera, as you can see by the name. So that again. So that's the sort of design of everything. The underlying code for this map is again blueprint and is in the level blueprint. Zoom in a little bit. So there's really only two things I needed for this game, basically to test for the win and lose states. So their blueprint system is very, very powerful. If you've coded in actual programming language syntax, the blueprint system seems to me like it'd just be very easy to understand. Basically, each of these elements are either sort of a function or a variable. So kind of drag and drop and get very, very similar results to actual text-based programming. So as you can see, this box here, this is actually a comment. So all this code in it is commented with test to win for win, and that's what it should do. So the first thing I'm getting here is an event that will be fired when any actor overlaps with my trigger box win. You can't always add these. That's like not an option to add unless you have your trigger box selected. So I selected trigger box lose 3, and if I right click, add event for trigger box lose 3, and you can add a variety of different events. This one's a collision based one, but this one's for the win. So when that anything collides with this event is fired. So I don't know what collided with it. I want to specifically only react to the player colliding with it. So I'm going to test if what collided with it is the player. So an output from this event is the actor that collided with it. I also call get player character. So I get the player character actor, and I'm using an is equal to operator. So if other actor and player character, if those are equal, this will return true, which is passed into a branch unit here. This is the equivalent of an if statement, basically saying if other actor is equal to player character, if that is true, this is what happens. If that was false, I could have arrowed off and had something else happen, but we don't need any false case. So on the true case, though, again, we see an open level, and in this case, it's the win menu, just to show that the player has won. Testing for lose is very similar, but as we saw previously, there are actually 4 trigger boxes for losing. It's a very similar system, but I wanted to be able to test for any of them. So each of those goes into an is equal to, and then or the first is 2 is equal to. So if this is true or this is true, then this or will return true. The second one, oops, did I just click? The second one, of course, is if either of these return true, then this will be true. And then if either of those ors are true, then this final or will be true. And that's the condition that's passed into my branch. And again, if that's true, meaning the player has collided with any one of these 4 trigger boxes, then we call open level for the lose menu. Very simple game here. I definitely had I definitely spent more time on the Unity project for some due to some outside events and things that happened. Unreal does seem like a very viable option for game development, even mobile dev. One interesting thing I ran into with this very small Unreal project, the first time I built the APK for this project, it came in at 158 megs. And that seems pretty large to me for as simple as a game it is. I did a good amount of research trying to figure out ways to reduce this. I changed from a distribution build to a shipping build that reduced maybe 10 to 15 megs. I also switched to using ETC1 texture compression. That reduced it quite a bit. And ultimately, I also temporarily deleted some files from the actual Unreal Engine previous to packaging the APK, as they were being included but never used, so I sort of tricked it into not packaging these unused files. With all of those changes, the resulting APK is closer to 70 or 80 megabytes, which is still fairly large, but around half of what I started with, though. That one step of temporarily deleting some of the engine files is a fairly scary concept. I probably would avoid that in the future. One thing I did learn I could have also done that I didn't do in this case was to, and they recommend this in some of the Unreal documentations, is to specifically start with an empty project as opposed to any of their demo ones, or using their starter content, as that that content will be included in the APK regardless of whether it's ultimately used. I did not follow that advice as I started this project before I learned that advice, though. So I did have their starter content to use with it. So that might have made my project or APK file additionally smaller, and I've gone that route. Thanks for listening.